Hi, and welcome to the Campbell Tech channel. My name is Sean Campbell, and today I'm going to show you how you can make a factory method injectable in Spring with Java. Now, this video is specifically for you if you understand how to implement the factory pattern in Java, or if you've already watched my factory pattern in Java creating objects with ease video. If you haven't, do not worry, you'll find a link to this video in the description. Here, you'll see that we have a classic factory method that returns a payment interface. In this case, it also takes in a enum payment method, and based on the value of the enum, we decide which concrete payment class to instantiate and return. For example, if it's credit card, we return new credit card payment. PayPal will return new PayPal payment, and if the enum value is Google Pay, we'll return a new Google Pay payment instance. But now, the problem here is, what if we are using dependency injection? Now, as you can imagine, each concrete class could have different dependencies that it depends on. For example, the credit card payment might have several services that it depends on, as well as repositories. This might look completely different to the PayPal payment. So we could, for example, have 5 dependencies that we need to pass to the constructor. Now, in such a case, our factory method could get quite complex, not even to mention adding unnecessary responsibility to our factory method. Instead, we can rely on dependency injection. The first thing that we want to go and do is to make this payment factory itself injectable. And we are going to use the component annotation to do this. Now, we don't just want a class, but an interface that we can depend on, because as the dependency inversion principle suggests, we should depend on abstractions and not concretions. So we want to go ahead and create a payment factory interface. So the first thing that we need to do is to remove the static keyword, because we are now going to implement an interface. Okay. So I want to use the payment factory name as the name for our interface. So let's change this name to payment factory impl. And then let's go ahead and create a new interface and call that payment factory. Now, it obviously feels if we are doing this upside down, but that's because we are converting a classic factory method into an injectable factory method. So let's go and copy the signature of the method and then use that here in our interface. All right, and then we can go ahead and simply implement that interface, and apart from adding the import statement, everything should be happy. Okay, so now we have done half of what we need to do to make this factory method injectable. So for now, we're implementing an interface, and we've added the component annotation to make this payment factory implementation injectable and to depend on our payment factory interface. So the next thing we can go and do is to change the name of our payment interface. Remember, here we have a pay method that takes in a big decimal amount and returns a string. And then we've got the concrete implementations that simply returns a message. And this is just really for us to see which concrete implementation it returns when the factory method returns a specific implementation based on our payment method enum value. Let's go ahead and just change the name of the payment interface to payment service, just to make it more Spring Boot friendly. And IntelliJ helps us to conveniently also add the service name to our concrete implementations as well. So just simply say select all, and then it'll also change the name of our concrete classes there. All right, the next thing we need to do is to go ahead and add the service annotation to each of our concrete payment service implementations. Okay, first for the credit card payment service, then for Google Pay payment service, also for the PayPal payment service. And then let's go ahead and move our payment factory implementation to the impl package. All right. Then we've got our payment service in the main payments package. And then I'm also going to drag the payment factory into the root of the payments package there. Okay, so now that we have our service annotations on our concrete payment service classes, we can continue making our factory method injectable. So let's go to our payment factory implementation. And then we can go ahead and create a private field for each one of our concrete payment service classes. So say private final credit card payment service. Call it credit card payment service. Also one for the PayPal payment service. And also one for the Google Pay payment service. And then let's go ahead and auto wire these into our constructor. Use the auto wired annotation, and then that will ensure that all these concrete payment service classes gets injected here. Okay, so now instead of saying new credit card payment service, in the case of the payment method enum value being credit card, we simply say return that service. Same for PayPal. And the same for Google Pay payment service. All right. And now, regardless of what dependencies the credit card payment service might have, it will get injected here. Okay. So our factory method is now completely injectable. And to test this, we can go ahead and create a controller. So first, I'm going to create a controllers package. Then a payment controller class. To make this a REST controller, use the REST controller annotation. And to specify our URI path, let's use the request mapping annotation. Okay, for our path, let's use something like /API/payments. And then we are going to inject our payment factory interface here. So again, private final payment factory. Give it a name, payment factory. Right, let's auto wire it into a constructor. Right, use the auto wired annotation here. And then let's specify a post method. So use the post mapping. We can modify the path ever so slightly, say /make payment. So it will be our IP address or domain name /API/payments/make payment. Then say public response entity. And then we'll simply return a string and call the method pay. We'll specify a request body. This needs to be an object, so let's go and add a DTO. First the package DTO, and then let's create a request DTO object. I'm going to call it payment request DTO. Right, now in here, let's specify two fields, public big decimal for our amount, big decimal is the preferred data type for money. Then also a field for our payment method. Okay, call it payment method. Right, and then we can use this as our request body. Go ahead and add the import statement, and then we can give it a name, payment request DTO. Okay, so now we can say payment service because we want the factory method to return the payment service interface or an implementation thereof. Let's call it payment service equals payment factory that we are injecting here dot create, and then we'll pass in the payment request DTO, specifically the payment method field on our request DTO. There we need to handle an exception, say surround with try catch. That is the class not found exception, because if there's a value of the payment method enum that is not handled or catered for in our factory method, then it will throw a class not found exception. Okay, so if this is the case, we want to return HTTP status code 500. So say return new response entity, and then simply say HTTP status dot internal server error, which is HTTP status code 500, as you can see there. Okay, but if everything goes well, we can say return new response entity, and then we'll say payment service dot pay, and we'll pass in the amount, which we also get on the request DTO, and we'll pass in HTTP status dot OK, which is HTTP status code 200, as you can see there. Okay, let's go ahead and debug to test if this all works. Okay, everything seems to run fine on port 8080. So if you haven't specified a service port specifically in your application.properties file, then it will default to port 8080. Just make sure, because a lot of us do have stuff running on port 8080 already. So in fact, let me show you quickly. So you probably already know this, but we can say server.port equals, let's just make it 8085, right? Just going to stop it, run it again. Okay, and then let's open up Postman. Okay, so we have a post method, so change it to a post method there, and then as our URL there, say http // localhost port 8085 /API /payments /make payment. Now this is obviously our request mapping /API /payments, and then /make payment. And then next we need to specify our request body, say raw and JSON, and then the request body is obviously our payment request DTO. So we need to specify two fields. Amount, I'm going to pass $1,000, and then we also need to specify a payment method. And this payment method needs to be either credit card, PayPal, or Google Pay. I'm just going to use Google Pay as an example. All right. Then make sure you've got a breakpoint in your controller method if you want to debug through the code, and then hit send. Okay, it hits our controller method, and then as you can see there, the value of amount is 1,000 and payment method is Google Pay. So I'm gonna step into this factory method. There you can see the value being Google Pay. Then it returns the Google Payment Service. You can see it over there, Google Payment Service. And then we pass in an amount of 1,000. And then I'm just going to let it run. And then you'll see it says successfully paid $1,000 to merchant using Google Pay. Let's change it to PayPal. Hit send. And then this time I'm just going to let it run. And there you'll see successfully paid $1,000 to merchant using PayPal. Let's say credit card. This time I want to go and add a breakpoint in the credit card payment service class, just so that you can see it actually hits this method. Right. Continue. It hits the pay method of the credit card payment service. And then there you'll see successfully paid $1,000 to merchant using a credit card. All right. So if we go back to our payment factory implementation, you'll see that it's quite simple to make a normal factory method an injectable factory method, okay? But you might say, hang on, this could get quite nasty if you've got like 50 different dependencies getting auto-wired into your constructor here. So if you don't like that, you could also go ahead and inject a list of the payment service interface. In other words, it'll provide a list of each and every concrete payment service implementation. So let's call it concrete payment services, something like that. And then we can go ahead and add it as the only parameter to our constructor there. And let's say this dot concrete payment services equal concrete payment services. Instead of returning the specific concrete payment service, you can go ahead and create a method, private payment service. We're going to return a payment service. Let's call it get payment service, and we'll pass in a class or the class type, and then we can say return concrete payment services dot stream. Then we'll use a filter, and then we'll filter and then use a method reference of type, say is instance. So we're saying filter on the specific instance, in other words the credit card payment service as an example, and then say map. Again, we'll use the method reference, we'll cast the type. Okay, now we're going to cast it to payment service, right? Because that's what we want to return. And then we'll say dot find first. So we want the first occurrence of the specific concrete payment service type, for example, credit card payment service. And then we'll say or else. So if it can't find it, we'll return null. Just make sure that your client code handles that. All right, so then we can call this method, say return get payment service, and we'll pass in credit card payment service dot class. All right, and here we'll say PayPal service class. Here we say get payment service, and then we'll pass in Google Pay payment service dot class. Okay, again, we can go ahead and test this if it works. Right, go to Postman. I'm just going to leave it credit card for now. Right, let it run. Here you can see it's credit card. There it hits our method. Oh, before I continue, you can see that the array list size is 3. So there we have all our concrete payment service implementations. Okay. And then there you can see that it returns credit card payment service. And then if we run it, it hits the pay method of credit card payment service. If we continue, you'll see successfully paid $1,000 to merchant using a credit card. Okay, so this is how you can make a factory method injectable if you're using Spring Boot with Java. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to our channel and click the like button. Till next time.